And these drastically affected the fossil fuel industries because they were part of the companies and the things that were actually shut down. As a matter of fact, it was a serious issue with this sector because a lot of their operations were actually shut down. Prices of fossil fuel products declined as a result of the price crash. People that were restricted were unable to get fossil fuels for their movement and all that. And as we know, during this period too, flights, the aviation industry was shut down in all across the globe. People were restricted from moving from one country to another. Even those that had meetings to attend to, had one functions or the other to attend to in one location or the other, were all restricted. Their movements were restricted. And even in countries, workers were also restricted from going to work. So in total, countries were totally locked down and people were really stressed out because there were no movements, no economic activities, no business to look up to run to, wake up in the morning and go for your business as usual in order for you to make a living out of your daily activities. So it became a serious issue in the world. And countries started bailing out their citizens, giving them funds, giving them food to see that they are well and ongoing. And on the other hand, in the medical aspect, they were providing medical facilities to ensure that the rate of the pandemic was quite reduced, the curve was flattened, and various precautions were put in place, like the social distancing, using of face masks and all that, as we all know. So this actually had significant impact on the industries. Market times and orders were reduced. Market structures and order were placed on hold. In local communities, people no longer go to markets and all that. So it affected the industries. And significantly, the major things that affected these industries were crude oil price crash. Because of the lockdown and because people were no longer able to move from one location to another, the demand for fossil fuel was reduced. People who were no longer buying fossil fuels, buying petrols for their car, aviation industries were no longer patronizing the fossil fuel industry to get fuel, to fuel their planes, because all the planes were all grounded. Vehicles were grounded and movement were grounded totally. So it affected the industries, and this led to a drastic drop in the prices of crude oil products. There was a price crash, a serious price crash. And this led, in March, the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Country members met to discuss the fate of the oil industry because of the COVID-19. And from their meeting, they agreed that 1.5 million barrels per day from production should be reduced in OPEC countries. Production should be reduced by 1.5 million barrels per day. And this affected companies, the fossil fuel sector. More so, the demands for the product also dropped because nobody was buying the product. In a report in Venezuela, they had barrels, millions of barrels, thousands of barrels stuck down in their ships in the high sea, but nobody ordered for this product because the demand for the product was dropped. The demand for the product dropped drastically as a result of the pandemic. No movement, no consumption of fossil fuels by vehicles, by companies, by industries that patronize this sector to actually power their plants and all that. And also, another aspect that actually affected it was that workers in these companies, in the oil sectors, were all sent back home because of the scare of infections and contaminations from workers. Because when they get to the rigs, they interact and they try as much as possible to work as a team and all that in order for them to have good output and all that. But because of the pandemic, this aspect was totally dropped. Workers were sent home. Production level dropped drastically, and it also affected the sector drastically. The price of the product dropped totally. Another factor that affected it too, like I said earlier, was the restrictions and shutdown. shutdown of major operative operations across the globe. It affected the sector. And from all this, we could learn that the fossil fuel industry has nothing to offer to us. The fossil fuel industry has no future to offer to us. Why? Because at a point in time, people started looking at options whereby they will no longer go to filling stations, because even the fuel stations were shut down. Like in Nigeria, the fuel stations were shut down. Majority of the countries that had serious lockdown, like Lagos, Abuja, people go out to even get fossil fuel, were arrested because they claimed that these persons were violating the laws. And it is one thing that people started looking at, if this fossil fuel industry is like this, then if we are being handled and treated like this, then there's no need for us to keep patronizing this field. There's no need for us to keep patronizing this sector. Rather, people started looking at the alternative, whereby they no longer go out to get fossil fuels. They no longer go out to get fuels to power their generators and get arrested by the authorities. They no longer look at the industries that produces it. Rather, they started looking within on how best they can generate power for themselves. And majority of the persons started looking out renewable energy sources. Like in Nigeria, I know of persons during this period that decided not to run their generator plants, to even drive their cars. Rather, they decided to walk short distance and even take private vehicles, public vehicles to go to their various destinations, just because they want to reduce their level of frequent visits to fuel stations and to patronize the fossil fuel industries. A lot of persons started installing renewable energy systems like the solar panels and all that. And it actually helped, because you now have power 24 hours of the day, compared to the fossil fuel that you run to the filling station to get fuel to power your generator set, and in less than 2 hours, the fuel will run down and your generator set goes off, your plant goes off. So people started thinking of alternative sources, alternative ways to power their energy system. And this drastically affected the prices of fossil fuel. It reduced and declined the prices of fossil fuel. And this is one thing the African leaders need to look at. They need to look at this, because looking at the lessons from the past, in part of pandemics, of epidemics like the Ebola in Africa, during this period, the extractive industries could no longer maintain their workers, could no longer maintain people that works at the extractive sites. So a lot of people were dropped. From some of the reports, a lot of workers were dropped. So these are some of the things that comes as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. It led to the dropping of workers. A lot of workers were dropped from the fossil fuel sectors without an alternative for them to look out to. A lot of persons were dropped from industries that rely solely on fossil fuels. And this actually affected the economy. It affected the lives of people. So the COVID-19 actually brought about a decline in the demand for fossil fuel, a decline in the dependency on fossil fuel. People actually look at avenues not to rely anymore on the fossil fuel. Like in Nigeria, the fossil fuel demands drastically. The Nigerian budget was focused on looking at the petroleum industry, the petroleum sector to boost this economy. The Nigerian budget is more or less based on the prices of crude oil in the international market. If the crude oil goes up, then the budget can meet up. They can be able to finance the budget. But when the prices dropped, they were unable to finance the budget, because they were looking at avenues whereby they can get funds, sell the fossil fuel products and get funds to back up the budget. But during this COVID-19 period, the Nigerian economy was seriously affected. The budget was seriously affected, up to the extent that the budget dropped. The president had to recall the budget that would have been passed into law, recall the budget and reduce the budget with over 10% decrease, because they could no longer fund the budget from fossil fuel. And this also led to the reduction on the pump prices of fossil fuel during the COVID-19 period. Initially, we were buying fossil fuel petroleum products in Nigeria for about 145 naira per barrel. That is close to about close to 1 point something dollars or thereabout or lesser. But at a point in time, it was reduced because people could no longer patronize the filling stations and all that. And our crude oil were stuck in the high seas. No country was asking us, how much do you sell your crude oil? We want to buy from you. Because all transport means ships and all transportation were grounded. And this seriously affected the prices of crude oil. It declined the prices of crude oil in the international market. This goes to show that fossil fuel cannot sustain African economy. In conclusion, another energy is possible because there is no future in fossil fuel. Another energy is possible. I wrote here in my note that for African nations who solely rely on revenues from fossil fuel, the connection of price collapse and the coronavirus has created a new threat of poverty and social political instability. The effective readiness of a pandemic will require more reliable community-private partnership. Community people must be involved because at the moment, the governments of Africa are thinking of how best we can supersede this, how best we can revive the economy, how best we can fund the fossil fuel sector to power the economy. But we are saying that the fossil fuel economy can no longer be powered, can no longer be funded. And there is no way it can survive the African economy. There's no way, because it has failed once and it will continue to fail. It will continue to fail. So for the economy to be revived, the community people need to be involved. They need to create a synergy. The government needs to create a synergy and a partnership to try as much as possible to create an economy that is based not on fossil fuel now, but it's based on harnessing the natural resources from community folks. Putting a halting fossil fuel, we create a better economy for us. We create a better environment for us, devoid of pollution and devoid of climate change issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cadmus, and sorry for trying to cut you off. But yeah, thank you. That was a really very interesting sort of perspective and analysis, and I guess somewhat optimistic view on the decline of fossil fuels across the region, and sort of seeing some really telling signs towards that end and a vision. Towards, I suppose, a cleaner, greener, better future. So thanks for that. I mean, in the statement itself, and I think so Cadmus is kind of reflecting one key aspect that came out in Africa Climate Justice Group statement, which is calling for a moratorium on fossil fuel and other extractive projects. So any new projects starting up during this time. And it's a key demand and a call, I think, that sort of synergizes with what you're saying, Cadmus. Unfortunately, I think, just to add in one little comment, this isn't the entire picture across Africa. We are also seeing that sort of extractive projects are starting up again. These fossil projects are kind of starting up again. And in fact, new projects are starting up as well. So while people are in lockdown, these extractive projects are trying to push ahead, and our governments are facilitating this in the worst, most destructive ways. So saying that during these times, we can't really go through EIA processes and so on, processes which would have democratic processes for participations where people can say, and give their right to say, and have their right to say no. So these are being circumvented, unfortunately, and I think we really need to look at that and how to sort of combat that sort of emerging trend that's happening during this period. So with that, I want to turn over to Graça Samo, who wants to give us some feminist perspectives on climate justice and COVID-19. Graça's our colleague from the World March of Women, and she's based in Mozambique. I'll hand over to you, Grasa.
Thank you, Trusha, and thank you, Matthias and Cadmus, who came before me. And I would like to make my contribution by bringing the consciousness to us that what Matthias and Cadmus have been mentioning, they are the same circumstances under which women are facing in this context of COVID and the context of economy and society as a whole. We found that in this context, everything that we have been naming as the forms of oppression and violations of rights, it's really becoming worsened during this context in which we are living. Violence against women, it's increasing all over the world. And extreme forms of violence are being evident. Now that people had to stay confined in their homes, we had an increase of gender-based violence, rape in the homes, and raping children and teenagers, which is causing increasing of unwanted pregnancies. Many children, many young girls are being impregnated either by members of family, either by neighborhood people. And these are things that we cannot become silent about. When we talk about this situation that is happening in the economy, that people are losing their means of living, if the informal work, informal activities, the informal market, where it has been the place where most of the women, especially in urban areas, are mechanisms of getting an income. In this context, they are losing their income. And we know that most of the women are the food providers in their families. They are the women who are supposed to make food to be on the table. They are stuck at home, they are losing all, and we want to highlight here how the police and military forces are using their power to destroy the means of living of people, to intimidate. We are facing all over the world, and especially in our African continent, we are facing the increase of militarization. We are not only talking about militarization in mentioning wars that are happening in different territories, but we're mentioning militarization in the way the state is interacting with the citizen, in the way the state is prohibiting people to occupy the public space, to occupy the spaces where they used to produce and take their means of living. In this, having to say this, we are saying that we need to use this context of pandemic to give visibility to all these forms of violation of women's and people's rights. We need to take this context of pandemic to show that the sexual division of labor is still an important topic to debate. Because in this time, we see how women are really taking the burden of excessive work, of duplication of their roles in homes in terms of educating children, in terms of taking care of the whole household. We need to rename, we need to rethink, and we need to redefine this economic model of extraction. My colleague Adams was talking about the extraction of oils, but the extractive economy, it's extracting from our territories, meaning the land, but it's also extracting from women's bodies. Women's territory, or women's bodies, as we call in our political expression, is being utilized to cover the missing link of the economy and the way of living of the people today. So women are really suffering more than what they were suffering before the pandemic. So we bring here the call that we need to rediscuss which kind of world that we want. We used to say post-pandemic. We don't know what is post-pandemic, but what we want to name is that we need to sit and rediscuss what kind of society that we want, what kind of families that we want, what kind of economy that we want. How do we want to share the responsibility in the all systems and subsystems that are the ones that will guarantee the continuity of life. We want to break from this dichotomy of economy And the same dichotomy that is creating difference as human beings and the nature. And there is a deep exploitation of the nature, while there is deep exploitation of women and other human beings. We need to rediscuss this and bring to the board what is it that is going to sustain life in the current order. We need to believe that we need to negotiate all forms of living. We need to negotiate the priorities for today. We need to negotiate what is the priority for us to produce. When we come to talk about food sovereignty, people are dying of hunger today. People are dying for not having access to their foods. And this crisis showed us that we are not going to survive if we are to depend from the external market, if we are to depend from imports, while we have our land where we can produce, we can create our own means of living. We need to consider back again these alternatives, because they are not just talks, but it's the reality of the possibilities of what we can really focus on, that we can really prioritize to think what is going to sustain life in this earth. We need to produce food. We need to take access to possibility of making decisions on the land, on the means of production, on the seed systems, and all the politics that goes around decision making, but also implementation of those decision makings to make things happen, to give possibility to people to make choices on how they want to organize their communities, how do they want to organize their processes. And this brings together all the debate around democracy. We need to go back and define what is democracy for us today, because if we see in this current context is that we have lost even hope on the role of our states, on the roles of our government in terms of defending the interests of people, and nevertheless the interests of women in our communities. So our role here is to say we need to unite. We need to talk back again. What are our values in this process of thinking the future of our nations, especially the future of our continent as Africa, with all the values that we have, with all the resources that we have, but that have been taken by the colonial forces, that it's really increasing that spectrum today. We need to be together, we need to unite force. So building and strengthening our movements to fight for these basic values and fight for the space of women to contribute in the deliberations of the policies, of the strategies, of the legislations, and especially on the systems that are going to really respond to the needs of the people and to the needs of the Mother Earth. We need to consider that we cannot continue to live in this division. We need to integrate. We need to consider that all the resources are scarce, and the resources that are available there need to be negotiated with the community, that there's been the guardians of the forest, they've been the guardians of the waters, of the rivers. We need to reclaim that power. We need to reclaim the capacity of feeding people with nutrition that is valid. And this is only possible if we can give the power to our communities, if we can give the power to the women who have been healing all the pains and the traumas in our communities. I know that our time is short, but I would like to call in this right moment to say that our feminist economy, it goes along with food sovereignty. It goes along with solidarity economy. It goes along with agroecology. It goes along with democracy, with solidarity, with freedom, with ethic, which is what we need today, and respect to each other and respect to other spaces that together we need to live in this earth. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Grasa, for that very impassioned and very sort of acute and accurate analysis of the feminist economy, I think, and sort of what we need going forward as well. I think, you know, the big point that you make about women being the center of the economy, but their work being unvalued, you know, and during this time, particularly during COVID-19, sort of their work increases, their workload increases, and sort of the harm on them increases as well. So it's a pretty desperate situation, and I think we need to think of your analysis as we sort of try to move forward with our calls and sort of what needs to be done, placing women back in the center. So I want to now turn over to our final speaker. It's Theodora Pierce, but I think maybe your colleague as well from Via Campesina in Tanzania might also be speaking. And this is really about the peasant youth calling for climate justice in a time of COVID. I hand over to you.
Okay, thank you. Greetings to all of you. We send solidarity greetings from Tanzania, from Via Campesina, and particularly from Mviwata. I would like to start my presentation from where Graça has spoken. She has managed to put in a lot of things which I think are very important during this time to take into account. And the situation of peasant farmers, particularly the youth farmers, has been critical during this COVID-19 crisis, but it has also been like that even during before the COVID-19 crisis. Well, as young farmers or as young peasants, what we have been seeing is the fake promises trying to address the climate change and its effects. And we are speaking of climate change because it's one among the challenges that young peasants are facing in the world, and particularly in Africa, specifically in the so-called global south. And so there are a number of solutions which are being given to us, but we call them fake solutions because they do not try or they do not question the real cause of the effect that we are facing, the climate change effects. So what we as the young peasants, what we are demanding is climate justice. That climate justice in a way that we want the whole world to understand that basically the ones us who are facing the great effects of climate change are not particularly the causative agent of the climate change that we are facing, in that the responsible people are the ones who are coming in with a lot of fake promises and fake solutions to the crisis. So we might be speaking of COVID-19 effects, land problems and everything, but even if we have 1 acre piece of land, the climate change effects still pose a great threat to our production system. So we see, or we call for all institutions, we call for first the global change, the global change in the way that we think of our economy, the global economy. So we need a global change in economies, but also we see we do believe that only agroecology can be the real solution to the climate change effects that as peasants we are facing. And it's through practice and throughout time that we have managed to learn agroecology can be the real solution to climate change, and thus assuring our families, our communities, our societies, our nations, and the world at large of food sovereignty. We need to produce what we want, but we need to produce under conditions that respect the Mother Earth, under the conditions that respect our rights, under the conditions that sees food as not merely as a commodity, but as a right that everyone has to acquire. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that input. So we do have, I guess, a little over 10 minutes to take your questions. I see there's, there were a couple of comments and thoughts and questions in the chat, but I've had a response that you don't want to take that forward. So there's actually only one question that's come up in the Q&A. If you really have a burning question, please do put it in the Q&A, and we're just going to ask our panelists to respond. So on the first question from Philip Owen, he says, how is the current crisis in Cabo Delgado linked to the gas industry impacting on the women and families driven from their homes? Do they have state support? And I guess Grasa can come in on this, and Matthias as well, if you're keen. Grasa, should we start with you?
The situation of Cabo Delgado is very complex, but Cabo Delgado is a province where we have some of our women's organization working there, and they are doing some work to support the people who have been displaced and then are now being relocated in the capital city. But the situation is very dramatic because it's a huge population that is being displaced in a very short time, and they have no relatives in the capital city. So some people are in shelters, some people are still on situations that they are in need of shelters. And there are, many campaigns from civil people who are putting together mechanisms of support, but it's too much complex. And for me, the most difficult thing is that we haven't had any position from the government to come and officially tell what is the situation and what is the strategy to respond to this. So people are doing everything that is tentative, not really that there is a guided or a lead strategy to respond to this crisis, because this is a real crisis. And in a context that there have been many disasters. Now, if you know, Cabo Delgado has gone through a cyclone some time ago, which was last year, almost a year ago. So there are already difficult situations there, even in terms of sanitation and many other conditions of accommodating people. So I think the calls that are being made internationally are to be taken seriously, because we need to put some collective effort, not only the nation, but internationally, to put some pressure to those who can really make decisions to stop that calamity. Mateus, I think you can add something on that.
Graça, I just wanted to compliment and agree with you that actually this issue of the violence against women, the drastic increase in the violence against women and children in the household, has been also one of the very, very prevalent situations that we've seen across the continent. So I overlooked that, but it's true that this is a very serious and continental-wide situation, especially if you add that layer to the Cabo Delgado conflict, then you see that how much more complex that situation is. And you've made a very good analysis of the situation in this very short time. I want to mention to everyone that there was a very nice workshop or webinar this morning about the situation in Mozambique and the alliance that was created in civil society around COVID, and also overlaying the Cabo Delgado conflict. So we won't have a lot of time to dwell on that here, but I want to say that congratulations to all the organizations that have managed to stay in the field in this situation. It's very difficult to organize and even be there. The government is actively pushing civil society and journalists away from the areas. So yes, keep on keeping on, sisters. I will finalize just my presentation, if I may, and I'm jumping the gun here, Trusha. I know we have very little time. I wanted really to share with everyone our website. There's been some questions in the chat of how can you find us. I'm sharing it now with you. I hope you can see this. So this is our Climate Justice for Africa website, where you will find the full statement. I just want to run through it very quickly. We have the statement currently in English, Arabic, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. We have a Kiswahili version of the website coming up. So I'll just scroll down quickly so you can see how more or less the website itself. I will highlight for you 2 points that you have a link to download the full statement and also a link to go to our Google form to endorse the statement. You'll find the information is very useful, and we commend this as for the first time in a long time, a Pan-African continental-wide alliance of progressive movements around climate justice to put their heads together and analyze and develop concrete proposals for us to deal with the crisis and actually building the post-COVID reality that we still don't know what it's going to be. Of course, we are putting our best energies into it. Finally, I would like to tell you about what are our latest actions as a campaign. Of course, we put together this website. We put the statement out first, then we developed this website. Recently, we have launched a media storm to make sure that our African governments see and respond to our demands in this statement. There's already information being put out there. I will also tell you guys that are out there that we also have an endorsers email list. So if you endorse the statement, we will add you or invite you to join this email group where we will be sharing more information from the group, the Africa Groups for Climate Justice, as well as a number of resources that we are planning to put out that will really, we hope, that will help galvanize and give useful instruments to those in this climate justice movement out there in the region and across the continent and around the world. Thank you very much. I will stop my screen share and hand over back to you, Trusha.
Thanks, Mateus. Thanks for showing that, and thanks for your comments on the website. We'll be building it out more as well, giving you more information about the group itself that is quite emergent at the moment. And so you can also perhaps look at sort of some of our key principles, and sort of if you feel like you and your organization aligns with us, perhaps you want to do further work with us going forward. So there is that open to you. I know that Philip had asked a follow-up question. Asking if there's a link between violence and the massive exploitation of gas reserves. Do either of you, Rasa or Mateus, kind of quickly answer that before we move to close?
Mm-hmm. Just very quickly, this is unfortunate. This is one of the many layers of complexity of this area. It's an area that has been historically neglected by governmental presence during colonial times, during socialist times, and during democracy, neoliberalist times. It is an area that has been, of course, the location of all of these natural resources, and of course that creates tension on the ground, that creates displacement, that creates disgruntlement, frustration, what's it called, marginalization, especially of the youth. And this, if you consider that this process started over 10 years ago, the youth that were 12, 13 back then are now coming to adulthood with nothing to look out for, and in front of a government that neglects them, that is violent to them. Now with the troops on the ground, there's a lot of this random violence going on. The situation is very difficult and complex. There's no one reason for the situation. Of course, we can track back to history and see how things build up. But the growing call really in the continent, in the country, is that we cannot solve a war with more war. Violence does not solve violence. We need peace. That's what we need. Thank you.
Thanks, Mateus. And I've just been told that there's also some new research that we'll be launching at WoMin, feminist political economy research done specifically in Mozambique. So watch out for that. And that should also help with this context as well. So we have just 2 minutes left. I'm wondering if I can put it back to the speakers for a 30-second closer of your sort of one key demand that you think that needs to go out to our African governments and institutions during this time. And you literally have 30 seconds. Can I start with Cadmus?
Okay, thank you very much for this closer. I would say due to the declining of prices and all that has in relation to the fossil fuel industry, my demands would be that we must remind ourselves that oil has failed us as Africans, and therefore we can no longer depend on it. As Africans can no longer be drowned in fossil fuel. Taking a look at the Mauritius case, it was, to me, I personally feel that during this lockdown period, those ships that were locked down in the seas were now being given opportunities because of the ease in the lockdown to move from one location to another. And I think it's high time we need to critically start looking at these issues for these industries for a halt in more introduction or re-entry of the sector into communities, because certain governments have given them the leverage, tax relief and all that to actually recover from the pandemic. So it's high time we look at this angle and put a halt to government funding these industries, giving them the leverages to operate in our communities and in our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Cadmus. Can I pass over to Grasa?
Yeah, I think if I could say something shortly is to remind our leaders in Africa that the power that they seem to have, it relies on their people. They cannot hang on out there making their deals with the corporations, with their business allies, because that is not going to last for good. They need to connect with their people and think what is good for Africa and let the reality of Africa to come out. That is what I have to say.
Thank you so much, Grasa. Theodora?
Well, thank you. As per our discussion, we have seen the great effects of what we have been through. And I think it's about time that we localize our production systems. We have seen the great crisis that we were facing during COVID-19. And it's all because we have left the issue of food production to multinationals and agribusiness streams. So it's very important that we localize our production system. We abide to agroecology, and we promote climate justice. And we call upon all nations to see that the only solution to climate change and its effects is through climate justice. But also we call upon SADC member countries to domesticate the UN Declaration of Peasants' Rights, because if we domesticate that declaration, we are going to solve a lot of problems on food crisis, a lot of problems on peasants, which we are currently facing. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Theodora. Can I hand over to you, Matthias, to give a final word and to close out the session?
Well, I have not much to add, really. This was a short but great discussion. Thank you for all the panelists that were here, that made your time to be here with us. Thank you to all our now 27 attendees. We expected much less, to be honest. So this is great. I hope this was informative. That's it. Keep on keeping on. The struggle continues. Food sovereignty now. As we say in Via Campesina, we build the movement and feed the people. We feed the people and build a movement to change the world. Thank you. Amanja.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Thank you for coming on. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.